For women, the fear and risk of pregnancy, as well as physical violation, are likely greater. I am asking this seriously and not to downplay any victim's experience. Story 1. Because it is always portrayed that you cannot rape a man and that he would always want it. Men do not have feelings and should not care about a man's feelings. Men suppress their feelings, so it does not matter. Any number of these or anything of a similar nature is pretty much the main reason. Story 2-1. The false belief that boys or men always want sex with anyone, and that if they are unattractive or nerdy, they should be grateful that someone had sex with them. The false belief that if a man has an erection, he is in the mood, wants sex, or consents. Morning erections are not related to desire, and physical stimulation or drugs can cause an erection against a man's will. Story 3. Gender bias. The stereotypical saying that women are weak raises the question, how can a woman rape a man? He must have liked it. Story 4. Personally, anyone I have ever talked to about a woman raping a man has shown equal disgust as if the roles were reversed. That being said, in my personal experience, very few people actually downplay men being raped by women. Here on Reddit and elsewhere on social media, however, I often read that people experience the opposite. I would guess it's the toughen-up mentality that people tend to have towards men, implying that men are generally strong and can always say no. Of course, this is not true because anyone can be put in an unwanted situation that is hard to get out of. Story 5. A woman here. I am going to make some broad generalizations. Our society at large still has this deeply ingrained idea that sex is something a man does and that is done to a woman. This is why it is okay for men to play the field, but women are supposed to keep their body count very low. In a marriage, women have sex to keep their husband happy. It is something men need and something women accept. Best case scenario, a woman allows a man to have sex with her. Worst case, he takes it by force. If you subscribe to that narrative, a man getting raped is like forcing him to eat a meal when he is full. Sure, maybe he did not want to eat, but he needed to eat sometime and he really loves eating most of the time, so how bad could it be? You are just giving him something he always wants. Whereas if women give out sex like it is a reward, then taking it from her is stealing. She does not really want it at the best of times. Making her do it against her will is even worse. This is, of course, total nonsense as an excuse. Sexual assault is sexual assault. Sex is something people want to do, and no matter how often or how many other people you do it with, it should always be that individual's choice. If it is forced, it is wrong. Genders of the parties irrelevant. But because there is still this narrative that men are so sex-crazed, it is hard to imagine them not wanting it or being that upset if it happens. It is wrong. Story 6. Men cannot get pregnant, and value is not attached to virginity. I do not know. I think it is traumatic for anyone to be raped, to be honest. Story 7. Men spend more time looking for sexual partners, and women spend more time choosing which sexual partner they will have. Therefore, if a woman forces herself on a man, he must be happy because he got what he wanted. This is completely flawed, but that is roughly what society thinks. Story 8. If you watch older films and television programs, sexual abuse or rape of men is often portrayed as humorous. This is changing for the better nowadays, but it is still seen as a lesser evil. The issue is a mixture of beliefs such as women are weaker, so they cannot harm a man, men are always seeking sex, men will always have sex with anyone, and the stereotypical idea of what a real man is, among other misconceptions. Story 9. I think there are many different factors here. A woman who is raped is penetrated, which automatically carries extra weight, either consciously or subconsciously. I suspect a man who is raped anally would also be treated more seriously than a man raped in another way. Generally, women are given more value for their virginity. Men cannot get pregnant. Misunderstanding of arousal and erections. If they did not want it, they would not be erect. This can also happen to women, but that is not the topic this time. There are, I am sure, many more reasons that I did not consider. I am not defending any of these reasons. I am just listing the reasons I believe exist. Story 10. In my country, the law means you cannot be raped by a woman, as it requires a penis to be involved, so even the term itself is inherently biased toward how it affects women. That said, I think part of the reason is that sexual assault legitimately affects men less overall. It is less common, and men are generally more powerful and have more control over being victims of it. While it is important not to belittle a man's experience, it is appropriate to acknowledge that this is an issue that disproportionately affects women. Story 11. Maybe because a man would typically have more physical control over the situation, this is a guess, and I am not excusing women who sexually assault men. It is bad and should be treated as harshly as with their counterparts. Story 12. I am only speaking for myself. I was raped by a woman. There is a culture among a specific mindset of entitled men who know they can generally physically overpower most women. Sexual entitlement to women's bodies and unfiltered expression of male sexual desire is normalized in many cultures. Even in cultures that claim to discourage that behavior, groups of men who think that way still manage to connect and bond in their mutual expression of sexual desire for women's bodies, enabling that entitlement and dehumanization. After rape, the trauma includes the fear that it can easily happen again. After an initial rape, that culture of entitlement by many men, often called rape culture, is a constant factor to consider every time a woman is out in public or with others in private. In my experience, I was incredibly drunk. I was too drunk to use my keys to unlock my doors and could barely make it upstairs. I told her no from the time I was at the entry of my apartment building until she somehow got me in bed, became erect, climbed on top of me, and sexually assaulted me. I said no the entire time. I was too drunk to physically push her off or restrain her. It was easier for me to let her finish than it was to fight. I still remember how revolting she looked in the face when she climaxed. I just managed to roll over and pass out once she was done. When I awoke in the morning, she was gone. Many may wonder how I managed to get erect while so drunk and not feeling sexual at all. The best answer I can give is that I was in my early 20s in my sexual prime, and sometimes a penis responds independently from the man's will and intention. Sure, it hurt. It makes me angry and hurt that my boundaries and consent were violated. But after the fact, I never once felt like I was under constant threat from other women who wanted to do the same. It was an isolated incident done by a very problematic, entitled, toxic person. I don't live in constant fear of being objectified by other women, where sexualization and entitlement to my body is normalized in a culture enabled and perpetuated by groups of those women. I do not feel like other women are a threat to me even if they wanted to be. Please spare me any "I'm sorry this happened to you" statements. They are as useless and empty as thoughts and prayers. Story 13. This way of thinking is socially ingrained. I always think of headlines about female teachers who have assaulted their students. It is almost never characterized that way. Instead, it says, "Teacher had sex with underage student." Why do they not call it rape? It is mind-boggling. Story 14. Women fought for years, if not decades, to bring awareness to society. What we men are doing now will benefit the next generation. Story 15. Unfortunately, many laws around the world define rape as penetration, including oral, anal, and vaginal. This means men are protected by law from rape by another man, but not by a woman. While the definition is evolving to be more inclusive, it is disturbing that it was written this way in the first place. Rape is rape. Many men are victims too, and I stand with them. Story 16. As a man, I think it is potentially worse for most women. They live in fear more often already due to the possibility of pregnancy. They are usually not strong enough to fight back, which I imagine leads to a higher percentage of occurrences. However, it is not such a great difference that I would call a man's sexual assault an annoyance. Anyone saying that is insane. Both are heinous and evil crimes regardless of gender. Just because one side has a few extra risks and conditions does not lessen the trauma or horror of the other, in my opinion. Story 17. In the United Kingdom, by law a woman cannot be charged with rape. Add to that the "I wish I had that at school," or "he would have loved it" rhetoric, and very few men see it as rape. It tends to go unreported, or the victim does report it and has to watch the whole ordeal turned into a joke on social media and in the press. Story 18. Men are disposable, women aren't. If they have any kind of extra burden, men have to share the burden. It is just how pack animals work. Story 19. I was sexually assaulted by a woman as a child. Trust me, it is traumatic. I am nearly 40, and it still affects many aspects of my life. Story 20. It has to do with the basic mentality of women feeling like victims because they are generally unable to physically defend themselves versus a man who has been automatically villainized in today's society by default, as if he did something wrong and probably deserves it the other way around. Men want to be heroes and women want to be victims, so men do not take it as hard as women do. Story 21. I cannot speak for men, but I believe they deserve to be taken much more seriously. There is a difference, though, in that men can and often do physically overpower women. Even if they do not actively do this, women may have a terror reaction that causes them to freeze because they know what men are capable of. Women are very rarely, if ever, strong enough to physically overpower a man, and I think that is much less frightening. Story 22. Because feminists want to maintain a narrative where women are always victims and men are always villains. Where I live, feminists succeeded in getting the legal definition of rape to only include situations where the victim has a vagina and the perpetrator has a penis. Story 23. When I see articles about teachers grooming and assaulting boys, the comments are often full of men saying, "Where were teachers like this when I was a kid?" or other odd remarks. When men come forward about being raped or molested, many male comments are dismissive and gross, such as, "Grow a pair and get over it." I also see a few negative remarks from women, like, "See, now you know how we feel." In conversations with men and women in real life, my female friends tend to take this more seriously than my male friends. From my female perspective, having been molested as a child and raped as an adult, most men dismiss other men's experiences. The women in the few survivors groups I have been in have been supportive of the male attendees. We also need to remember that men rape and molest boys and other men as well. Story 24. Rape is rape, no matter the gender. It is a horrific experience and causes lasting trauma. I have personally never seen it as any less serious. I have only seen it as less common for a woman to rape a male. Story 25. Many people have already mentioned this, but I will emphasize it. There is a lack of acknowledgement of men's actual feelings. People often fail to realize that men can be raped or sexually assaulted or harassed. Honestly, just consider what people say to women who have been raped, comments blaming them for what they were wearing. Then people turn this around to the other gender. For example, some men make inappropriate comments on posts about female predators, expressing a desire to have that woman as a teacher or for sexual reasons. Both situations are equally wrong. Of course, women experience it more frequently, but that does not diminish the trauma that men endure. Story 26. Because men do not know how to support other men, nor do they really want to. An underage male student is sexually assaulted by a conventionally attractive female teacher. He is considered lucky. This is terrible. Story 27. Because society is unfair and probably no one believes the man. I know at least one case where she assaulted the guy without his consent. He realized it and was upset with her. Almost no one believed him, and the police did nothing. One day, as revenge and while upset, she saw him with another girl and decided to say he assaulted her. She made up a story. The police, as unreliable as they were, believed her. After a while, she, with some sense, admitted she was lying, even though she said that the law wanted to continue with the case. The police were already involved and investigating and wanted to prosecute the guy. Because the legal system is slow and inefficient, for months he had false accusations against him, despite her admitting the story was false. Finally, more than 1 year after it all started, the case was closed. He was innocent. She was admitted to psychiatric care and accused of false allegations and other offenses. Story 28. Just gonna post some actual science. Do not mind me. Story 29. I was technically sexually assaulted by a female, but no one would remotely care. It also didn't really bother me as much as I'd imagine a woman would feel in the same situation. It's ultimately stereotypes and gender expectations. If a male teacher sleeps with a female student, it's considered the worst thing in the world. If a female teacher sleeps with a male student, it's often seen as acceptable. Long story short, I was drunk and somewhat blacked out. She took me to her room, and I woke up next to her in the morning, naked. I had brief moments of consciousness that I remembered once I woke up. I simply got out of bed, got dressed, and left. Story 30. Unfortunately, many people cannot imagine a scenario in which a man would not consent to sex or resort to victim blaming by asking, "How did he even get an erection if it was rape?" These are unhealthy and persistent myths that have yet to be fully debunked in popular culture. Story 31. Sure, rape of men committed by women is often perceived as less traumatic by many people. There is a gender bias. Cultural and societal reasons are a big part of that. However, it is complex and sometimes confusing for male victims. Often, there is a delayed reaction as they process the experience. Men are conditioned to believe they always want sex and should enjoy it. As a result, many people do not take their rape as seriously. Common situations include when they are younger or children or teenagers and an older woman takes advantage of them. A female boss or authority figure coerces or emotionally manipulates them, or when they are under the influence of alcohol and not in control or able to give consent. Other reasons why it is confusing. 1. Pleasure is often still involved for men, so it is very confusing for the male victim during and after the rape. For women, there is usually more pain and violence during rape. Perception is therefore skewed. People often assume that physical arousal equals consent, which is not true. 2. There is a belief that men may have been in some control of the situation. They might think they could have stopped it at a certain point or felt they started engaging or moving their body, giving physical consent. Some may not immediately feel as violated or dominated as women might after being coerced or assaulted. Some victims rationalize that because they are not being penetrated, it feels less scary. This is not true. Men can feel emasculated, scared, their personal space and boundaries violated, and generally unsafe and emotional. 3. Women are perceived in society and culture as less dangerous and less strong than men. They are seen more as nurturers and carers. If women do rape men, they are less likely to torture and murder their victims compared to men raping women, according to statistics. 4. There is a serious lack of data and reporting of male rape by women. Men often feel embarrassed or humiliated and do not come forward to report the abuse. As a result, there are fewer healthcare and mental health services available, fewer support groups, and limited structures to offer advice and therapy. Men tend to compartmentalize and suppress emotional distress, making it difficult for them to come to terms with what happened. Story 32. It is considered deeply traumatic for both, although as men we did not know it was rape and thought we just got what we were always after. Story 33. I might add that, in my opinion, rape by a woman of a man in a traditional penis in vagina or penis in anal way is highly unlikely. So let's flip that slightly. For instance, penetration with an object by a woman into a man's body, or the more likely sexual assault by a woman on a man, is very possible. I will cite personal experience. As a younger boy and coming up man, I had no less than 4 female cousins, all in their teens but on the verge of adulthood, 3 aunts married to uncles, and 2 neighborhood women who had sexual engagement with me between the ages of 13 and 17. I won't deny all these women were attractive and very kind and nurturing, in their mid-30s to early 40s, except the cousins as stated. I was young and thought it was awesome. None of these encounters were penetrative penis in vagina. They were all petting, touching, and oral sex both ways. Did I enjoy it and allow it after they initiated the awkward situation? Yes, I sure did. In hindsight, 50 years later, it was nothing short of blatant sexual assault by women on a young boy. Am I traumatized today? No, but I have had guilt and feelings of loss of innocence years later, especially awkward at family gatherings. So that's my take. It was the 1970s and free love was kind of a thing then. Story 34. I, as a woman, do not view male sexual assault and rape as any less traumatic than women's. Women have to deal with insinuations that they brought it on themselves, and men have to deal with feeling that, as men, they should have been able to control or avoid it. It is horribly dehumanizing to feel that your existence is unsafe within your own body. Looking at literature reviews, there is progress in addressing the unique challenges. But just as with women, when the issue started to be actually addressed and not excused or ignored, Progress seems slower than it should be for a violent crime. As you have raised the topic, where do you see the need for education and male acceptance of the necessity to report such crimes and seek treatment? Story 35. Why is a man raping a woman generally considered a deeply traumatic experience for the woman, while a woman raping a man is often perceived as less serious or even just an annoyance? I do not personally know anyone who holds this opinion. Generally, it is much more probable that a man will rape a woman than that a woman will rape a man. It is well known that women are at greater risk. Story 36. I technically lost my virginity at 17 to a 21-year-old who was known as the cherry popper at my friend's house party, but she does not count in my body count. I was intoxicated and on ecstasy in my friend's laundry room, trying to climb over a stack of clothes to get to the fridge for more beer. She flipped me over, and I had breasts in my face. This was 1998, and I did not have the internet or access to pornography, so that was a big deal since I was not desensitized. Before this, I thought this girl was Amanda. I had been cozying up to her for weeks. It was the long game back then, and thought it was her as I could barely see her face in the shadows and was basically having sex with a pair of breasts. When I called out Mandy, she stopped for a second and then kept going, saying something along the lines of, "I can call her whatever I want." I suddenly realized, even in my drunken state, that this was not Mandy. I stopped her, and a voice from the shadows said, "Don't be a coward." She had unprotected sex with me, and I was basically already there, and the drugs made it feel amazing, so I just let it happen. I did not tell anyone, but she did. She had a little ledger book where she kept the guys' names and rated them, and she considered me not bad. Guys high-fived me for that, and the girls were disgusted with me for a while. I lost my chance with Mandy. I am a pretty masculine guy, but I remember breaking down in my room several times. I could not tell anyone. I could not say I did not want to be just another number in that woman's book. Maybe it is not as bad as a woman being raped. Maybe I took it like a champ, whatever that means. It did not exactly taint me, and I have a wonderful, loving relationship with my wife of over 20 years. But here I am, still talking about it almost 30 years later, still getting red in the face as I write this. Story 37. This subreddit is trash. The moderator is a woman who is biased against men. Find another group to post real conversations like this. To all real men who see this comment before it gets deleted. Story 38. Rape is not just penetration of the vagina by the penis. Rape can involve an object entering any orifice. I will not go into detail, but you can imagine that it would be very traumatizing for most men. We just do not hear about that type of rape often. Story 39. I see a lot of people asking these questions and very few people asserting the opposite. I think we have a mindset in society that does not actually exist. Yes, I have seen trolls come out of the woodwork and say, "Wish that was me." But those are not the majority of people from what I can tell. Maybe I am just being an optimist, but I genuinely do not think rape is ever a small deal. There may be a select group who treat it that way, which is probably a sign of the type of person they are to begin with. If we ask people who would commit rape whether it is a big deal, their answer is obviously going to be biased. Most people are not like that. It is equally wrong whether a man or a woman is raped. Women do have a higher risk of a worse aftermath, but the act of rape is evil in all scenarios. Story 40. Just like women being upset that they cannot wear the same dress twice, this issue is our own fault. Men are not the reason women cannot wear the same dress twice. It is other women. Similarly, other men are the reason this topic is treated less seriously. I mean, come on, go to an article about a woman having an inappropriate relationship with her student and look at the comments. Where was she when I was in school? I bet that student had the time of his life. Story 41. I do not think women raping men involves the same level of physical trauma for the victim as when the roles are reversed. For men who are raped, it is more about the sense of violation and lack of consent than being physically hurt and forced upon. The stereotype of a man being ready and willing at any time is unhelpful. Story 42. In general, it is assumed and somewhat known that it is much harder for men to obtain sex. Therefore, if a man is raped, it might be mistakenly perceived as an unexpected event for him. Story 43. Because society is messed up, The man is supposed to be more powerful and apparently can stop getting raped, but women cannot because they are considered weak and need to be protected. It is so messed up, and the fact that it gets downplayed makes me mad because what the heck? Story 44. Playing devil's advocate, female on male rape is seldom the violent or forceful kind. Secondly, men being raped by women are less likely to be injured. If a woman is raping and resists, or the male penetrated is particularly aggressive, it is not just a mental or dignity issue. It actually hurts. Story 45. Because society has made us think that men always want sex, and if a man wants it, then it cannot be forced, right? Many believe this is because of patriarchy. Not entirely. Yes, men have perpetuated this more, but it was women who actually initiated such a thought process. A woman had sex with a man, and he is seen as the victim? Loser. He is not a real man. This attitude still exists today, with some women insulting men or calling them names when rejected. Gradually, this shame became ingrained in younger generations of men and continues today. Even men are raised to think that if a woman forced herself upon them, then they are the lucky ones. This is a harsh reality that few discuss. Unfortunately, there is little written on this subject. One would need to consult older books on gender roles in society and history that cannot be changed now, or find someone online who speaks openly about it, but avoid unreliable sources. Story 46. The psychology is different. I am a man. If I am raped by a woman, it is certainly traumatic. However, I have the strength to defend myself in the future from potential further assaults. I will not see every woman as a potential attacker. If I am a woman and I am raped, I am still more vulnerable to potential future assaults by men than a man would be. Not only have I been traumatized by the experience, but now I view all men as potential threats that I can do little to physically defend myself against. There is no difference in the trauma of the actual solitary event. Both are equally traumatic. But a difference is that men generally have the physical capability to defend themselves against a woman in the future, whereas a woman generally does not. Imagine you get mauled by a dog. You are traumatized by the experience. Now imagine you have to live in a house with 20 dogs, and they are replaced by a different set of 20 dogs every day. Most of them are probably nice, but you really have no idea. Would you feel better about that living situation if you were wearing jeans and a leather jacket and given a baseball bat, or if you were wearing a swimsuit covered in peanut butter and given a ham sandwich? You are traumatized either way, but in one scenario, your base level of fear on a daily basis is significantly higher. Story 47. Because it is a reality for many men. I have been sexually assaulted, and quite frankly, I do not care. Many men I know have had similar experiences. I do not know any woman who, after the Me Too movement, has not made it clear that she has been sexually assaulted and traumatized. Just to be clear, that does not make it okay. But I can understand where it comes from. Story 48. Come on, brother. Do you really need to ask this? Imagine the fear and trauma of a large man dominating a woman, or do not, because this is a disturbing topic. A man, even a boy, can generally defend himself against a woman. Story 49. Well, largely because of obvious double standards. Also, an average woman is going to find it much more difficult to sexually assault a man than vice versa. Not to play into the double standards I mentioned, but technically I have been sexually assaulted by a woman and assaulted by a few others. These were not violent experiences, but situations where I clearly expressed that I did not consent and they did what they wanted anyway. Honestly, these were not traumatic experiences at all. They were annoying. Story 50. Being forcefully entered seems intuitively more violating than being forced to enter involuntarily. Fortunately, I do not know either experience. Story 51. I think many men view another man being raped by a woman as that man was lucky. They believe that any sex, even forced, is pleasurable for the man, especially if he orgasms during it. Boys joke about wanting a woman to rape them, thinking it is an easy way to achieve sexual satisfaction. I can attest that the opposite is true. My father was raped by a neighbor when he was very young. He had been injured in a car accident and already had self-image issues. She emphasized to him that his worth as a person was tied to his large penis. This caused him to view himself only in those terms, and he became a sex addict. He admitted in therapy that he had generally low self-esteem, but that having women admire his penis was a boost to his fragile ego. Story 52. Bit of a silly question. You have basically answered it yourself. Also, the rates of men sexually assaulting women are astronomically higher than the opposite. Therefore, it is more important to focus on that. Story 53. I am not sure if it has changed, but unless it is anal penetration with an object, women theoretically cannot assault men, as the legal definition includes penetration. This may have changed now though. Please let me know if it has. Story 54. Just as a thought experiment, assume that 70% of men are physically stronger than 90% of women. So 90% of all women can be physically overpowered by most men. This means there can be instances of woman-on-man rape involving physical coercion. There could also be situations where two women or a man and a woman force a man to have sex with a woman. A weapon could be involved as well. However, most men can physically overpower a woman assailant, so coercion in these cases is more likely to involve other methods such as drugs or alcohol. Pure physical coercion, such as being held down while fully conscious and forced to penetrate or being penetrated, is less likely for a man. When gender roles are reversed, pure physical coercion by someone who can easily hurt you while you are fully conscious is not only possible but also likely. It is difficult for a woman to prevent penetration by a stronger assailant. This is not the complete answer, but it is part of it. Many women are attacked while fully aware, fearing for their lives and completely unable to resist. Story 55. One thing I have not seen yet is purity myths. Rape used to be described as a fate worse than death for women specifically because they were considered to have lost all value when it happened and were thought to be better off dead. The severity of it is both overstated for women and downplayed by men. It is an assault and a very intimate one. However, I would never want to be killed instead. Story 56. Because a woman could never hold down and rape a fully conscious, sober man. Additionally, pain is not something associated with sex for men at all. For women, it is well known that there are many factors that can cause pain during sex, and with rape, all those factors are even worse. That is the main point. 90% of the time when you hear about a man being raped, it involves drugs or alcohol. Rarely does it involve violence. However, the takeaway should be that we should not compare trauma and rape to determine who suffered more. Instead, we should have equal empathy and compassion for all victims, regardless of the circumstances. Story 57. I've never looked this up, but I can't be the only one wondering, how does a man stay erect if he is not sexually aroused? What exactly happens in cases of female-on-male sexual assault? Do they drug the man? Use physical stimulation? How does a woman overpower a man? I have never understood this, and now I am asking. Story 58. I think it is more traumatic to have someone enter your body without permission, whether you are a man or a woman. Man-on-man or man-on-woman situations seem to be more invasive and typically carry more risks for the receiving partner rather than the giving partner. Story 59. Patriarchy. By societal standards, men are expected to be the stronger and more dominant side who always pursue something to satisfy their desires, while women are expected to be fragile, submissive beings who hesitate even in a consenting relationship. So when a woman reverses the narrative and commits sexual assault against a man, people go into denial, saying things like, "Oh, they are probably role-playing. The man must have paid that woman," or "Why can't he just fight and leave? You had sex though, what's the problem?" It is ignorant and unacceptable, but that is how it is. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.